Today on the 1% podcast, we are honored to have John Otter as our special guest with us. John is the chair and CEO of the S16 Limited Partnership here in Boise. He is also a director of the Simplot Company. John is the son of former Governor Butch Otter and the grandson of Simplot. John and his wife Molly live here in Boise with their 3 kids, and we're honored to have John on the podcast with us today. Talk to us about Jump, and for those that may not know, Jack's urban meeting place, what his vision was for this and his hope, and you know what it was intended to be and symbolize, and really what it is and what it means to your family and his legacy.
You try to make your own luck.
Yep. Knowing what you know now, what would you tell yourself? What would be a piece of advice that you would have given to yourself? Today we're joined by John Otter. John, thanks for being here with us. Appreciate you making time. John and I met, I think it was a little over a year ago. Maybe it's 2 years ago. I think it was just last year. You and your wife Molly had a fundraiser at your home, and we'd been invited to come, and so we came and participated. And your home's beautiful, by the way. It was fun to get to.
It's all her. Anything you can see, it was her vision. If you can't see it, like internet and speakers and stuff like that.
All the stuff buried in the walls. That was your department.
Yeah.
Your home's beautiful. We got to come for a fundraising event, and your son was coming in, and he was having a problem with his drone. And, well, I don't know that I was successful, but I tried, and we're in process of building a home, and so our wives kind of connected on that, and your wife was really gracious to indulge and share what she had done and kind of some of her design inspiration and stuff. So it's fun to kind of hit it off right off the bat with you guys, and your kids are fun, and you know you're doing the politic thing and being mom and dad, and kids getting ready for bed and everything, and we know how that goes. We have 7 kids, so
you have kids around. I mean, we're a family.
Yep.
And it's important for folks to get to know us, but you know, at the same time, it's good for them just to know that what it takes to be involved.
Yep.
And did they look you in the eye?
They did.
Okay.
Yeah. Your son told me thank you, and yeah. So no, it was great. So you guys have a few dogs and a bunch of chickens too, I understand.
We do. Yeah, we have a farm. We got 3 labs.
Okay.
And then we've got, I'm going to say 10 chickens outside. We got 4 chicks inside and 2 ducks that are getting huge inside as well. But every spring we try to add to the flock.
Okay.
Fortunately, we haven't lost too many. It's odd, but we haven't lost too many.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, we're going to be getting into the chicken business here pretty soon too. We're moving on to some acreage, and so getting little chickens and all the stuff is.
I haven't done the math, but I'm pretty certain that when you're raising chickens, you're paying more for eggs.
Oh, for sure.
You had $8 eggs at the grocery store.
Yeah, for sure. So let's get into, first off, share a little bit about you, your background. Those that may not know John Otter. John, fortunate enough, grew up here in Boise. Your grandfather's Simplot. Your dad is CL Butch Otter, the former governor of the state of Idaho. What was that like growing up in Boise with a grandfather who was, the wealthiest, most influential person in the state? I mean, I think that's probably safe to say.
I don't know that I knew it then.
Okay.
I don't know that I understood it. I knew that, we had a business, and that was important to the community. But I don't know that I had a measuring stick for something like that at the time.
You were just a kid, and
both of them were just like, you got to get out and work your ass off. So, get out there. I used to help my granddad. He'd come and wake me up when we were in McCall in the summertime. He'd wake me up at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. We go saddle up the horses. And that's what he did every day during the summer. And we'd go ride these beautiful rides above the lake. And, then we'd stop, and he'd walk behind a random tree and pull out a pick and an axe. Like, all right, let's get to work. And we continue improving or building the trail. But it was always about, you can't sit around and do nothing. You got to be doing something.
Yep.
And contributing.
Yeah. So the Simplot Corporation, headquartered here in Boise. So you're growing up here as a little kid at the time. You have 3 other siblings. Is that right?
Yep.
So you're the oldest of 4 siblings.
Yep.
You have 3 younger sisters. So you're kind of the older brother. Had the pressure on your shoulders, I guess, for better or for worse.
You could say that. Yeah.
So tell us about growing up. What, your dad was obviously very busy, very involved in the Simplot Corporation, and then involved in politics. How old were you when your dad kind of started getting involved in politics, and what do you remember about?
My first picture in the paper, I think I was 1 year old.
Okay.
I was in a backpack on my mom's back. He served in the legislature in the early 70s, and then he got out of it for a while. I mean, he was still involved, but it wasn't until 1986 that he ran for lieutenant governor. And so it was really about that time. And at that point, the whole family was involved, traveling the state, going to events, going to participating in parades, those kind of things. And, that started to give me a little bit of perspective on what he was up to and what his goals were.
Yeah.
And, but yeah, it was awesome. Got to see the state and got to meet a lot of people.
Had the mobile headquarters.
We did.
Riding around in a motorhome. And
big motorhome, that's right. With Otter for Idaho on the side of it.
Okay. Yeah. So how old were you about when your dad was running for?
I would have been, that would have been, I've been 17.
Okay. So you're in high school at that time, but obviously, aware of what that was like. And Simplot had gone international a number of years before. That was in like the late 70s, like that, where Ray Kroc decided that he wanted to go take McDonald's all over the world. And
right, Japan was one of the first international stores. And so my dad had a big hand in that. We got to have lunch a couple of months ago where I invited him to headquarters and talk with our food leadership team, and I wanted them to hear the lore and for him to see what we're up to these days. And so he was gone a lot. I mean, he was you mentioned before that one of our first factories was in Europe, was in Holland. He was looking at building factories anywhere from Saudi Arabia to the Philippines at the time. And Japan we ended up building a factory in Hermiston, Oregon. And we literally floated 2 barges a week down the Columbia, loaded onto a big ship, and then sent to Japan. But yeah, he was quite busy with that.
As your dad would say, the fastest or the least expensive way to ship something other than throwing it is shipping it through water. Right?
Exactly. Exactly. He'll still argue that today.
Yeah. Okay, so you grow up here, you go to North Junior High, you go to Boise High School, graduate from here, and then your parents tell you what? They say...
we sat down at the kitchen table and literally, I'm not mincing words, I said, listen, you're a unique position in Idaho. Your middle name is Simplot, your last name is Otter, and we strongly recommend that you leave town, if not the state, to go to college. And, Boise in the 80s was an amazing place to grow up, just like I think it is today.
Yeah.
Glad my kids get to do it, but I was itching to get out.
Yeah, it was different for sure.
Yeah. Want to go and do something and go somewhere else. And so I applied to a bunch of smaller schools around the Northwest and ended up at the University of Puget Sound in Tacoma.
Okay.
And graduated in politics and economics there. And graduation weekend, my dad and I are driving in the car, and he says, look, 5 years, don't come home for 5 years. Go work for somebody else, go get some experience, show yourself that you can do something without the company backing, without the family backing. And that 5 years turned into 30. And there was a time where I was pretty certain I wasn't going to come back to Boise.
Yeah.
And so I did a number of things while I was there. I went to work for a great company, Expeditors International. So they're like it was a different industry then. Mostly it's handled by UPS and FedEx today, but Expeditors still stands on its own as call it a travel agent for freight.
Okay.
So we had big clients. We had Walmart, Ace Hardware, the list goes on. But basically they'd say, hey, we just had a place to PO at our factory in China. So we'd make sure that the container was there, ready to be loaded, put it on a vessel, had it pre-cleared through customs before it hit shore.
Yep.
And my job, and the thing that was great about at least that part of my life, And I kind of liken it a little bit to being in the finance world in New York. If you're young and you're hungry, these guys will let you work as long and as hard as you want. And I had this Simplot chip on my shoulder that I had to prove to everybody and myself that I had to progress on my own. So, 20-hour days. I'm not kidding. It'll be 7 days a week. And my boss and I had a competition about who could turn off the alarm in the morning and who would turn it back on at night. And sometimes I'd go home, take a nap, and then come into work at 2:30 in the morning, and he'd beat me by 10 minutes. Like, damn. But we had a small team, and we opened up a new business for expediters in Seattle, where we would take consolidated containers where customers didn't need a full container, so we would load 3, 4, 5 customers into a container.
Yeah.
And so we would bring those into Seattle, and my office was literally in a warehouse, and we would unload those containers and reload them on trucks for destination. So they come out of one origin, and we'd send them to multiple destinations. And it was a great experience for me. I mean, getting to work that hard and being part of it. And that was our culture at the time at Expeditors. And it was great for me because I got to work on this chip on my shoulder. Not sure if I still have it today or not.
Well, what do you feel like you gained from that? I mean, I think there's so many things that can be gained from, number one, going and being away, right? Like not having anyone that probably really knew of your family background or whatever, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
you go away, you're in this situation where, hey, I've got to sink or swim and this is on me. I'm working 20-hour days. I'm putting in the work. I'm grinding. Really, as much as you work on a business, really the greatest net effect is on yourself.
Totally.
Through those processes.
Totally.
Can you talk to us about that?
I got it out of my system. But my boss,
a young man's game.
That's right.
Yeah.
My boss was he was a tough guy. He came out of the LTL, the less than truckload business, which is frantic. It's people are always calling, complaining.
Yeah.
Where's my stuff? But he always had this mentality that you got to do whatever it takes. So you got 30 trucks lined up at the port waiting to get their stuff out, and yours is 20th in line. What are the phone calls you can make to try to in exchange favors, et cetera, to try to get that container out of port quicker, so your customer's happy. And at the same time, the holidays, we're still on the phone from home on Thanksgiving weekend. Hey, can we get this thing out? Can you do me this favor, et cetera? And we got our customers what they needed, and sometimes we didn't, but we're sure as heck tried.
In order to stay in business, that's what you got to do, right? It's
Absolutely.
like that's
absolutely.
You got to take care of the customer.
And a funny story. I had this particularly sensitive customer. He was in Manhattan, and we loaded this truck up in Seattle, and he drove all the way across. The guy had hired a bunch of people to unload the truck, and he had customers that he had to take care of. And the trucker gets to he's on Manhattan Island, and he's like, well, I'm lost. I don't know where to go. And this is before the GPS, all that. And so, I had come home early that day from work at about 6:00 at night, and I was going for a run. My big cell phone at the time, rang because I kept checking in with him to see what's going on. I'm like, well, here's what you do: hire a taxi, give him the address, and then follow him there. Right. So I hang up with him, and about, 45 minutes later, the guy calls me. He says, okay, I'm here. All right. That's great. And meanwhile, my customers called me right after that. The truck's still not there. The driver had gotten out of the truck, gotten into the cab, went to the destination, and then forgot where he left the truck. And the taxi was coming already. So it's like, things are obvious, aren't quite so obvious. And, I don't know how I could have explained it better, but
you learn so much about business through those kinds of things, where you're having to be an innovator in a way that may not to all of other people maybe seem like innovation, but the idea to, number one, I'm keeping my cell phone with me even when I'm going for a run. This guy calls and he's lost. I've got a problem solving thing through. Hey, go hire a taxi, have him guide you there. I had like, as you're saying that, like, I'm like thinking the same thing, like, okay, yeah, hire a taxi, show them to, have them tell you where to go or follow them there. But just thinking through things like that, like you gain so many important skills, right? You're working out of a warehouse when, your grandpa's company that your dad, is running or whatever at the time is at one capital center down here in downtown Boise, and you're working out of a warehouse up in Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
But that idea that there is no other way, right? Like the obstacle is the way. The only way to get to where you want to go is to do the things that
just try to be the best at whatever it is that you're doing.
Yeah.
So it's that simple. And it doesn't matter what path you take, even if you're a barista, try to be the best barista. I don't want to say even if there's nothing wrong with being.
No, for sure, right? But it's like there's, and I think that sometimes people think that, hey, I'm just in this lowly job, right? I'm working in a warehouse somewhere, I'm working in a coffee shop, or I'm working at some restaurant, or I'm just in this little family business. That there was an opportunity for someone like J.R. Simplot or Butch Otter or John Otter. Mm-hmm. There isn't the same opportunity for me, right? And I think that people can so oftentimes think that. And maybe, from there, let's pivot and just go back and maybe talk about a little bit of the history that people may not be aware of. So your grandfather, J.R. Simplot's born in Iowa in 1909. His family relocates to Idaho like a year later, something like that, down in Carter County, Burley. And so talk to us about the beginnings of the J.R. Simplot Company. It started by like feeding hogs, came up with a innovative way of.
So they moved out, and he was quite young. I think he was like 5 years old at the time. But his dad, my great-grandfather, and his family carved out 165 acres out of sagebrush and started farming. And so
down in Burley.
Yeah, down in Burley. Right up, I wouldn't say on the banks of the Snake, but pretty close to the Snake River. And he grew up in that farming, work hard environment. And at one point, he wanted to go to a basketball game. And his dad said, no, you got to stay home and work. And he's basically said, forget it. I quit. And he left home at 14, in the 8th grade, and quit school in the 8th grade.
Yeah.
And went to, and rented a room in the was it the Burley? I'm going to get in trouble for not remembering this, but I think it was the Burley Hotel. And so then he went to work for others. I think he said he earned $3 a day, and $1 of that went to room and board. And one thing that he didn't like was waste. And you know how with commodity markets work, it just got too expensive for a lot of farmers or a lot of big growers to feed their animals. And at one point, the cost to feed them was more than what they were going to get out of it. And so they started calling him. And hating seeing that waste, he said, "Oh, listen, let me take it on." So sometimes you'd have to pay $1. Sometimes they just, please take them off of it, so we don't have to worry about it. And he always told the story about how he went back to the family farm with his dad, built a great big vat out of I want to say 55-gallon drums, pounded it out and started a fire underneath it and started throwing offcuts from the farm. Not many people know this, but he'd go out on the range and harvest a horse to put some protein in it. And he was able to fatten these pigs up over the wintertime. I want to say it was 1929. That spring, no one had pigs, and everyone wanted them. And so here we are, 19 years old, and right before the Great Depression, and he got handed a check for $7,000. Now, what would most people do with something like that?
Go spend it.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. But he bought land, he leased land, bought horses, and went into farming for himself. And potatoes was a way he figured he could make some money out of it.
At 19 years old.
Mm-hmm. And so through the 30s, that's basically what he did. He built sheds up and down. I think 30 some sheds between I'm going to get this wrong too, but Burley and Vail, Oregon, along the Snake River, and they'd load sacks of potatoes and ship them to Chicago and New York. And wasn't a whole lot of money at it, but
he was growing potatoes.
But he was doing it, and the potato, it might sound easy, just throw a seed potato in the ground, and next thing you know, sometimes you get that in your pantry. But it's easy, but it's not. Potatoes are very fickle, And so he was able to learn and help his neighbors, et cetera, create some standards around that. And while he was doing that, one of our big stories is the coin toss. So he and his partner decided to invest in Idaho, Southern Idaho's first electric potato sorter.
Huh.
And this thing was not complicated. It was basically a conveyor belt that went across the table that was run by a motor, and it made it easier to eye each potato and pull out the bad ones.
Okay.
And so help raise your quality.
Yeah.
And not wanting to see an asset sit idle, he went and leased it to all the neighbors and helped them out too. And his partner was getting pressure from some other guys in the industry saying, hey, lowering your costs, increasing your reputation, you got to stop this. And so they got into an argument over it. And Granddad says, well, I'll flip you for it. And so we pulled out a coin and he won that toss.
Wow.
But I'm knowing my granddad, just his character, we'd still be sitting here today having the conversation, even if he'd lost that coin toss.
Yeah. Yeah. He was going to figure out a way to make it work no matter what. And
exactly.
Yeah. There was no luck about it. It was, if I lost that coin toss,
he'd figure out
another way.
He'd have figured out a different way. But, life, even then, it wasn't easy. And then I want to say it was sometime in the second half of the 30s. He had a customer that he shipped his cold onions, his onions that weren't exactly right for market, were perfect for dehydrating.
Okay.
So he shipped these potatoes down to California, and the guy owed him something like $7,000. It was
a lot of money back
then.
Yeah.
Huge amount of money. It was enough to get in the car and drive all the way down there and ask him about it. And so he gets there and he's sitting waiting for quite a while in the guy's lobby, and another gentleman comes in and sits down and they get to chatting, and turns out this guy was from the War Department. And literally on the back of a napkin, they scraped out, I need so many pounds of onion flake and I need so many pounds of onion powder. And Granddad signed it, but he didn't know a dang thing about dehydrating anything at that point. So,
but he's like, I'll figure it out.
Exactly. So, he took a tour of the guy's factory, got the name and the town of the equipment, and stopped at that town and put in an order for some dryers on his way home. And then, I don't know, a year or so later, they showed up and he worked out a deal with the city of Caldwell to build this factory. And that's where our factory sits today.
Yeah.
And so he gets in the dehydrating business, and then World War II happens. And I tell you, by the end of the war, we were the third largest supplier by volume of food to the front. And we have original letters in our archives from soldiers. Here, think about it. You open up a can, you pour out some powder and pour in some hot
mix it up, and
hot water. And these guys are writing home saying, hey, thanks. You remind me of home, love your product, et cetera.
On the other side of the world, whether they're over in the Pacific,
exactly,
Europe, and
exactly. And, companies like Boeing and Ford and people who built airplanes and tanks get the attention. But we're pretty proud of being able to make that contribution.
Well, and that's unbelievable to me because World War II concluded in 1945. Mm-hmm. So at the oldest, he would have been 34 years old, right? So like at this point,
yep.
So he's somewhere 30 to 34 years old, becoming, one of the largest producers by volume, supplying the military and, the World War II effort.
Mm-hmm.
It's unbelievable.
Well, and it goes back to that grit because, things are scarce, and we ended up we got into the busing business to be able to bring employees to and from the factory. We got into the lumber business so that we could build the packaging for it. I mean, there were so many issues and problems I have to solve to make sure you met those deliveries.
Yeah.
And it's part of that grit that we were talking about.
Well, I love that. And, this idea that I'm stuck where I am, or life didn't land me on third base. Mm-hmm. I didn't have all these opportunities. I think that it can be easy for people to fall into that way of thinking and to think that, hey, the people that are successful were born into it. Either you're born on third base or you weren't. And so, the world is full of the haves and the have-nots. But the reality is everyone's family was broke at some point. Everyone's family, was dysfunctional at some point, and people that have their family life together, people that have their business together, anyone that's been able to be successful, someone made that change, right? Someone made a generational, multi-generational impact on their family and on lots of people.
Hard to take luck out of the equation.
Yeah.
Now luck still plays a part in it, but
yeah.
But you make your own luck, or you try to make your own luck.
Yep.
And to your point there about opportunities, et cetera, there's a reason why he flew a 50 by 35-foot flag above his house, because he was proud to be in America.
Yeah.
There are a few other places in the world at the time, and sometimes even now,
Yeah.
that somebody could come out of the sagebrush and do what he did.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing. I want to pivot and talk about your dad just a little bit.
Yeah.
So I've done some homework on your dad, and obviously growing up in Idaho, everyone knows who Butch Otter is. And so your dad had humble beginnings as well. I mean, his family, his mom and dad both lived in Kansas. Yeah. One of 9 kids, was he the 6th or something like that in his family? And so they were certainly not a family of means by any means. Maybe talk about your dad and about his humble upbringing. It was funny. I was listening to your dad tell the story about his dad driving him out to a labor camp out off Farmway Road, out in Caldwell, and like that's
still there.
That's the house where we lived at when you were born, and my grandparents lived out off of Farmway Road. My mom was raised out off of Farmway Road, and so that was, as a kid, we'd always go out to my grandparents' house out on Farmway Road out in Caldwell. So yeah, no, that just kind of connected with me. But let's talk about your dad a little bit, and kind of what he went through and how he got to where he was, because he goes from being a kid living on a farm in Caldwell, Idaho, to eventually becoming president of Simplot and the governor of the state of Idaho.
He had the tenacity and the grit as well. Always looking to succeed. Football was one of his favorite things to play, just because it was a challenge, and he had to get through that challenge to score a goal.
Yeah.
And I kind of think life is like that for him even now. But one of 9 kids, and my grandfather, Grandpa Ben, wasn't in the military, but it was kind of as if Dad grew up in a military household, because they're always moving.
Yeah.
And it was either moving because he was an electrician, journeyman electrician, and it was either to chase a job, a job opportunity, or God called. And so my dad's got he's got his fingerprints on the Catholic Church in McCall and in Council, because my grandfather it was really important for him to get to build something like that.
And so your dad was always part of that and was always having to work alongside him. And
exactly. And so he decided to go to college. He wanted to study in the seminary, so he went to St. Martin's College in oh gosh, I can't believe it.
The Olympia area?
Yeah, right outside of
Lacey.
Yeah, Lacey. That's right. I was going to say Lacey.
Yeah. We have a little connection on the Puget Sound too. In fact, fun fact. So my first internship out of college, when I was in my undergrad, was up on Fort Lewis McChord.
Oh, really?
And so we lived in Tacoma area, Lakewood, actually is where we lived at. We lived in a little old lady's attic apartment, and we were poor, had no money, and we didn't have a place to live. Anyway, through a connection at the church, I called and they said, "Oh, I think there's this little old lady that has a attic apartment. Ann Costanis is her name. And if you're out there listening to this, thank you." But so she let us rent her attic apartment for $400 a month. And so we rented her attic apartment, and I worked on Fort Lewis McChord and got to work on a Warriors in Transition barracks and a Special Forces training complex up there. And
cool.
So we loved the Puget Sound area. We had some friends that lived down in Lacey, so we'd make trips to Lacey and Olympia and all that. But I loved our time up in Tacoma, Puget Sound, Seattle area. So yeah, really beautiful.
It's a pretty area.
Yep. But sorry, so I digress. So your dad was going to seminary school up in.
Yep. Yeah, and at the time, my grandparents owned a dairy in Emmett, and my grandfather was driving down the hill, as you drive off
Freeze out hill, whatever. Yeah.
On that, and it was during the winter, and he slid off the road, got injured pretty bad. So Dad had to come home and run the dairy.
Wow.
And I'll let him tell the stories about that. But
yeah, we're gonna have to have him on.
But there was a while there where he didn't want to see another cow.
Yeah.
And what's funny is that later I practically grew up on a farm because he couldn't wait to get back into it.
Okay.
But
because he's a cowboy through and through.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. But so he worked hard at that, and then went to Boise Junior College for a couple of years, and then after he met my mom, ended up graduating from the College of Idaho in politics, and started with the J.R. Simplot Company. And I don't want to steal his stories, but
they're great stories. They're amazing stories.
He's got a lot. And it was something similar. I'm gonna, I'm in my early 20s, and I'm gonna work as hard as anybody else, harder than anybody else, to get where I need to be. And he spent 7 years at the Caldwell factory, which had been converted from dehydrating to French fries.
Okay.
And when he got out of the factory, few people could sell a French fry better than he could, just because you knew the ins and outs.
Yeah.
And again, potatoes fickle, so's a French fry. You wouldn't believe the amount of technology that goes in just the potato itself and getting it from the field to the factory and getting the highest yields you can out of it, et cetera. And he quizzes me on stuff.
And he's sharp as a tack. Like, it is unbelievable. Like, you hear him tell stories, and he's still talking about milk yields and poundage and the butterfat content and storing the potatoes at 38 degrees with 99% humidity. And, he's just like...
He's passionate about it.
Yeah.
So he worked his way up through the Simplot Company and ended up... serving on the board of directors. I want to say it was 1981. So that's when we moved from Caldwell to Boise.
Okay.
And that's when I entered North Junior High.
Okay.
And but yeah, he worked hard there selling groceries.
And where did you guys live at? So you grew up out in Caldwell. And then you moved over
to live on Harrison.
Okay.
In fact, we lived in the same house. When Granddad moved up to the hill, we moved into his house
on Harrison Boulevard.
I got to grow up in the house that my mom grew up.
That's amazing. And where in Caldwell did you guys live at when you were
really right next to the high school off of Linden.
Okay.
Off of Linden.
Yeah. What's now Syringa Middle School or whatever, but the old Caldwell High School.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I walked to what's in Lincoln
Elementary School, just right down the block.
Yeah. So
it's amazing.
Yeah. So he worked his way up through the company, and at the same time dabbled in politics. And like I said, got elected in 1986 as lieutenant governor.
It's amazing. Talk to us about. Let's talk a little bit about what the J.R. Simplot Company does, and for most of us that are much less aware in that process, about turning potatoes into, I guess, rewinding back, right? He goes from the hog business into starting to sell commodities, and could have just been, hey, I'm a potato farmer, and that's it. That's what we do.
Well,
I go sell my potatoes, and how it kind of grew and evolved from there. And
after the war, the market for dehydrated food pretty well dried up.
Yeah.
So there was some really tough years in there. And so they started experimenting, and Granddad, one of his favorite phrases was, hire good people and turn them loose, and which is our philosophy today.
We love that.
And so one of his guys came to him and said, "Hey, I need a freezer. Go ahead, get the freezer." Then he came in later with a tray full of French fries, and Granddad's trying the French fries. He's like, "Okay, what's the big deal?" Well, they'd been frozen, and that was what the big deal was. And at the time, they did it in batch process, but they did a lot of experimentation.
But back then, everything was, restaurants would just buy potatoes and they'd process them in the restaurant.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, freezer space was super expensive.
Yeah.
Frozen was considered lower quality.
Yeah.
There were a whole bunch of barriers. It was tough to get a French fry into a restaurant. This just wasn't the way it was done. McDonald's at the time, they had potato choppers just like you'd see at In-N-Out or Five Guys or something like that today. But Granddad knew that we could deliver a consistent product. One of the complexities of a potato is when you put it in storage, you put late season, so October, November, you harvest those potatoes and they go into storage. And like you just said, 38 degrees, 99% humidity, et cetera. And even stored under those perfect conditions, the potato's still alive and it's still evolving.
Yeah.
And starches turn into sugar. So you can take the same potato and fry it cut it into French fries and fry it in November, and it's going to come out fairly white. Take that same potato, store it perfectly. In April, it's going to come out dark because those sugars caramelize in the fryer. And so that's one of the complexities that we have to work out every day.
Yeah.
Depending on, not all potatoes are the same, not all farms are the same, etc. But when the French fry goes into the box, we want them to look the same year round. And so he knew that he that was the vision. Can we deliver this?
Yeah.
So 1948 is when that happened.
The fact that he had that vision too, or had people on his team that they helped develop that vision of, hey, this can really be the future.
Exactly.
We can deliver a higher quality product that's more consistent and eliminate a lot of these quality issues from a lot of our customers.
Exactly. And
they brought value to the marketplace.
Exactly. And consistency. Yeah. You could expect what you were going to get when you open the bag. So when restaurants wouldn't take us, we went retail. So for a long time, there was a Simplot brand in Albertsons, grocery stores, etc. And along at the same time, I started to do something similar. And
well, it's interesting. I mean, you have Albertsons kind of growing right here in Boise, Idaho at the same time.
That's why I say Albertsons. Because he and Joe Albertson, my granddad, were good friends.
Okay.
That was, hey, let's see if this thing works. And it did. Until our packaging portion of our factory burned down in 1976. I know that because at the time, before we moved next to the high school, we lived on Canyon Hill.
Okay.
And we sat down and watched it burn from Canyon Hill.
Wow.
But at the same time, we'd also graduated into more food service, restaurants, etc. And, you figure 1948 to 1967, and Granddad was knocking on Ray Kroc's door for years. Hey, you should try this French fry. It's consistent. And, I don't want any of those greasy things and, they're frozen, etc. But he finally convinced Ray Kroc to do a trial on a handshake. And we're still very proud of that handshake.
The golden handshake.
The golden handshake. And what's interesting, too, is that a couple years ago, we had McDonald's leadership out. And they, too, are very proud of that handshake. No contracts, just our commitment to each other. And what I learned in that meeting is that we're kind of like a couple that's been married for 50 years. You know each other's quirks. And, you're not afraid to say what you think and everything, which is, to me, is incredibly healthy.
Yeah.
And so anyway, on that handshake, he went and raised the money himself, borrowing, writing his own checks, etc., to build what we called Plant 2 at the time.
Okay. Which was out in Caldwell as well. Okay.
Yep. And in fact, it ran until 2014 when we built the new one.
Yeah.
And for a long time, it was the first McDonald's dedicated line.
Okay.
And for a long time, every French fry that was made in our factory or a competitor's factory had to be matched against the output of that factory.
Wow.
And so our business model had changed, and Granddad was invited to join the board of McDonald's.
Wow.
Where he ended up spending 12 years. But at first he told Ray Kroc no, because he wanted to sell French fries to everyone, not just McDonald's.
Okay.
And funny story.
Which was probably strategic on Ray's part as well. Like, hey, I'm going to get this guy on my board and exclusive with me. And
totally. And I think, they appreciate each other's business approach to business.
Yeah.
And it made us that much closer. But great book called Behind the Golden Arches.
Okay.
That tells a story about Granddad's first board meeting where they're in there and they're talking about business, etc. And then towards the end, Ray Kroc announces that he wants to buy a jet. And Granddad was not big on jets. And he's like, listen, it costs a lot of money. What is it? You don't get anything from it. And so he says, well, listen, if I invested in a company that was going to buy a jet, I'd sell my stock. Here he's telling his biggest customer, on this issue, you should pound sand. So Ray Kroc made a deal that he bought the jet and he leased it to McDonald's corporate for $1 a year.
Wow. So he wasn't afraid to just kind of speak his mind and to share what he thought. I do want to talk about a little bit. Sorry, you and I are both struggling with the same thing. That golden handshake, and I've heard your dad talk about another experience that he had later on when Simplot at first worked, you were getting into Japan, and he was working on doing a deal. I want to say it was like 700 million pounds of potatoes or something like that, to the gentleman that had the rights to all the McDonald's franchises over there.
Mr. Fujita-san,
Yes.
Ken Fujita, who had, he was the first offshore franchisee. And unlike most franchisees who get one store at a time, he basically got Japan. And so Dad, knowing this, learned that Mr. Fujita-san was at a hotel in Vancouver, BC. So he went up there and bought a big giant bouquet of flowers, and he took it up to to Den's room, and popped out from behind the flowers, said, "Hey, I'm Butch Otter. I'm with Simplot. Would love to talk to you about selling French fries." And but I think the best outcome out of that meeting was that they agreed upon a price, they agreed on a volume, and Dad got home and management at the time says, "Well, you got to get him to sign this contract."
Yeah.
And Dad says, "Well, I did all this, etc. Okay, give me the paperwork. I'll fly back up there and meet."
Sounds reasonable, right? It's
exactly
$250 million or whatever it was.
Exactly. It was huge. It was huge for us, and it was big for them. And so he sat down with Mr. Fujita, and after they had the discussion, he says, "Well, look, if we have a problem, we're not going to work it out together. We have to go back to this piece of paper.
Yeah.
Is that what we really want?" And, I don't know where that ended up, but it goes back to that commitment, that handshake, and do what you say you're going to do.
Yep. Well, and let's talk about that for a minute. My grandpa and my dad both had the same way. They said that people buy from people. Mm-hmm. I'm a firm believer that people follow people. Mm-hmm. And, in your experience, you've worked in several different industries all over the world, now with Simplot Corporation. Talk about what your experience has been that way, and what kind of that heritage is, and what you've learned from that of doing business with people, and the fact that your word and your handshake still means something, right? Like, contracts are important.
Yeah.
I have contracts come across my desk almost on a daily basis. And
mm-hmm.
There's things that we have to be involved with. And sometimes obviously that makes sense, but that idea that, hey, if we're really going to do something together, my word has to mean something and your word has to mean something. Like, we're shaking hands and we're doing business. It's the person that's on the other end of this deal is
absolutely
what I care about the most.
Absolutely. I got invited to join the Simplot board in 2015. I'm living in Seattle, got my cute wife, and we've got baby number 3 on the way. Just finished a house, rebuilding a house on the water on Mercer Island.
Oh, wow.
We're 10 minutes from downtown Seattle, 10 minutes from downtown Bellevue. And so I get invited to join the board, and my travel picked up quite a bit after that. So I'd fly here to Boise for meetings, and then I'd go visit our mine on the Wyoming border, or I'd go back to Australia. And there were 2 things that hit me, because Molly kept saying every time I came home, she goes, "Are we going to move?" I mean, she lived 10 years in Manhattan, and I bring her to Seattle, and she wasn't all that big on Seattle, but she was excited about the prospect of moving to Boise. And I'm like, "No, it's just a board seat. I can do this from here. We got our house. We got our life here. This is great." And it took me 2 years to realize that, one, if you're an owner in a tightly held business, family member, you're not just a board seat.
Yeah.
People care what you think.
Yeah.
You gotta know your stuff. And, but that's part of that commitment that we were just talking about. And the other thing was the culture that we've evolved into is one where people work hard, they care about each other. Well, we still have competition, et cetera. Every company has that. You need that, but it's respectful, and it's welcoming. And having worked for Campbell Soup and Expeditors, et cetera, I mean, their culture is everything when it comes to a company. For me, it's one of the most important assets. And so the way that people take care of each other, they're going to take care of our farmer, they're going to take care of our customer, and that's how we're going to succeed. And it all comes from that commitment to people and that cross commitment to people too.
That belief that if I give you what you want, ultimately I'm going to get what I want. And
Absolutely.
as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's a powerful part of your guys' culture. So for people that may not be aware, maybe talk a little bit about the structure of the Simplot Company. Roughly 16,000 employees worldwide. You guys are in how many countries and offices and warehouses and factories and stuff all over the world?
So we're
privately held.
We're privately held. We've got basically my granddad had 4 kids, so the company's ownership is divided among them. I get to represent my mom, and I've gotten to serve with the last 10 years with my mom.
Okay.
Yeah, which has been amazing. But we represent my family, and then I've got 2 cousins and an uncle that we work closely together with on managing the family's perspective on the company.
Yeah.
But otherwise, we've got professional management, people who've grown up in their industries. A lot of them have grown up with Simplot.
Yeah.
And we rely on them heavily on strategy, on execution, etc. But we're kind of the last check, as Colin Powell always said, question the experts. And that's what we try. That's what we try to do. But we started out in potatoes, and World War II comes along. You couldn't get fertilizer, so with the government's help at the time, we built a factory in Pocatello, and ended up buying it from the government. But that was our
the Don plant. Is that what that one's called? Yeah.
Yeah. It was the Don plant and the gay mine named after my mom, Gay Simplot.
And there's like a 90-mile tunnel or something that connects the two of them.
First, there was the mine was a lot closer at the time, but we've exhausted that mine.
Okay.
And then we in the early '80s we found some phosphate deposits in outside the town of Afton, Wyoming.
Yeah,
it's on the Idaho
Star County. Yeah,
but
Star Valley. Yeah.
Beautiful area. But this mine sits 90 miles from Pocatello, and we've got a 9-inch pipe that connect the two. So we don't have to rail, we don't have to truck. We don't have to worry about safety issues and those kind of things.
Yeah.
And plus, it's an inexpensive way to ship your raw material.
Absolutely.
So it's like the pump is this massive. It's probably as big as this room, and just got these pistons that just jam. Basically, it's phosphate or mixed with water, and these pistons just pound it.
Well, and working with state governments and other entities to be able to make something like that happen. I mean, that's the whole other side of this business. Mm-hmm. We really haven't talked about how large business and government often go hand in hand, because your dad was very well prepared to serve in the House of Representatives, to serve as the governor, because of a lot of his experience with dealing with governments and business all over the world, and maybe talk about kind of that perspective from the corporate level.
Well, as far as like government.
Yeah, you guys are, I'm sure, having to work with governments all over the world all the time.
No, we do.
And wherever you're trying to build a new factory or whatever you're trying to do.
Because government's there to represent its citizens, the people. And so anytime you want to do something big, you need to have those kind of relationships.
Yep.
And we've grown up. Government has evolved, laws have evolved. We're concerned about different things than we were in the 40s.
Yeah.
I mean, then we were worried about winning a war, but and so there does have to be a tight partnership between the two. Permitting a mine, it's a 15-20 year process.
Yeah.
Look at Perpetua Resources and how they're trying to clean up the Stibnite mine.
Yep.
They've been at it for 15 years. They're getting closer each time, but they still got a ways yet to go.
Yeah.
But, we have to make promises to the government. We have to live up to those promises just like we would with our customers.
Yeah.
And that's the way we look at it.
Yeah. So vertically integrating into the fertilizer business, eventually getting into the cattle business. How did the cattle business portion come along?
I've heard it a couple of different ways, but the way my dad likes to,
depends on how he's feeling that day,
likes to describe it is that he's, you have a choice. You got starchy water that you have to treat, that you have to worry about, and you can't just dump it in the river.
All the byproduct from the potato processing.
Yeah. Exactly. So do you build $100 million starch treatment plant, or do you change that source of, or that form of energy into manure? If you can feed it to cattle, then, and as my dad said, as long as we don't get in the cattle business, we'll be okay. And my granddad's not one to just
not getting a little bit in.
We don't dabble in things, right?
Yeah.
So fertilizer started out as a factory, and we had a couple of outlets around the state and in the region. In 2020, we made our largest acquisition, a company called Pinnacle Ag. And they basically expanded our retail footprint almost to the East Coast. So we've got over 200 little stores and a lot of towns you never heard of, where farmers come and say, I need X delivered. And they take our advice too. We've got crop advisors that kind of diagnose the field. What am I growing? What does the weather outlook look like this year, et cetera. And so that's where we sell fertilizer. And I want to say we're probably the third largest in North America when it comes to that. French fries has evolved. We've got I think every large French fry processor supplies just about every chain and restaurant out there. And these contracts and agreements, et cetera, kind of ebb and flow about who gets what and who's doing better, et cetera, based on deliveries and quality and all that kind of stuff. But everyone's got their own fry that they want. And so we've, our factory in Caldwell, I think we've got 360 different SKUs.
Oh, wow.
That we make. And
so you're processing the fry based on what that restaurant or
customer wants. On spec with that. But and with French fries, we've got factories. We've got 2 in Washington. A third will be finished this fall. As far as French fries goes, we also have a vegetable processing plant in Basco. Factories in Grand Forks, North Dakota, Portage, La Prairie, Manitoba, just on the other side of the border. Just opened one in Ahmedabad, India. I was just there last month.
Wow.
We were the first in 1992 to open up a French fry factory in China.
Wow.
And we've since the town of Beijing grew up around us.
Wow.
So we ended up moving that further out in to Yinchuan, which is about a 2.5-hour flight west of Beijing. We've got our Australian factories. In 1995, we had an opportunity to get a factory that we helped build in Tasmania. And the company that owned it was a conglomerate, and they did car batteries, they did pacemakers, and then they had this very large food portfolio in Australia. And they got in trouble with their pacemaker lawsuits, et cetera, and they needed to raise cash. And so we went down and took a look at it and said, we'll take the French fry factory. And they said, no, you'll take everything that Nestle won't take, because they did yogurt and stuff. So that got us into retail. So if you go to Australia, you'll see our products advertised on TV.
Wow.
We're in about 7 different places in the grocery store. Everything from our Legos pasta sauce, which would be the equivalent of Ragu or Progresso here. Equivalent of Star-Kissed tuna under the John West brand. Edgel would be similar to Green Giant, a lot of canned vegetables. And I don't remember how many different things we do there. But
it's amazing.
But yeah, so we've been,
and you guys are growing all over the world as well, right? Like
always looking for a way, always looking for that growth, either through or organic growth or building whatever. Sometimes it's an acquisition. But, and then
and headquartered right here in Boise, Idaho, and the headquarters building downtown, the Jump Project. Maybe let's talk about that for just a second.
Yeah.
For anyone that's ever visited Boise, an iconic portion of downtown, which downtown has changed a lot over the last 12 to 15 years.
Though? People still work hard to establish eye contact.
They do.
So they can say hi.
They do. It's different here, right? It's like you go spend time. I was a missionary in Southern California, lived up in Seattle. I've been a lot of other places, and you come to Boise, Idaho, and it's just different, right? It has we're not a small town anymore, but it still has some of that small town feel.
It does. And I think the newcomers, we've had a lot of them the last couple of years, especially since COVID, they embrace it.
Yeah. Yeah. They're here because they want what's already here, right? For the most part. And no, that's true. So anyone that comes to visit Boise, it's the Simplot World headquarters downtown, which is a beautiful really attractive building. You guys did an amazing job, which I'm going to need to get you to give me a tour one of these days.
Absolutely.
Love to come down and come see it firsthand. We worked on it a lot as it was being built. So I was down at the site frequently. And then the Jump project. Talk to us about Jump, and for those that may not know, Jack's Urban Meeting Place, what his vision was for this and his hope, and what it was intended to be and symbolize, and really what it is and what it means to your family and his legacy.
His vision was a museum on agriculture.
Okay.
Hence the tractors.
Yeah.
He sat one day at an auction. A guy had spent his life collecting, I don't know, hundreds of tractors. Very few of them had rubber tires, and some of them were still steam engines. But that guy had passed away, and his family decided it was time to put it up for auction. And he had more fun that day just acquiring tractors. And we've got a lot of them on display at our headquarters and at Jump. But we've got, I don't know, I'm going to get this wrong, 30, 50 more.
Okay.
Up below the flag.
Okay.
And but part of it was to show kind of the history of agriculture and get people in Boise a little closer to it. But after he passed, that vision kind of we transformed it a little bit into really just a community center. But the theme was him. The reason why we have a 5-story slide is about risk taking, and it's an opportunity for people to spread their wings. Do you want to teach a aerobics class? Do you want to teach a cooking class? It's a wonderful spot to have.
We've hosted a number of our events there, and it's been amazing. We hosted our VIP party last year, which we'll have to make sure you and Molly get invited to this year. We do our Wheeler Foundation and American VIP party there, and so we're doing a benefit dinner for Sheriff Donahue in the Man Up Crusade that he runs to bring help and awareness to victims of domestic violence. But anyway, so we host events like that there as well, and it's an amazing facility. And yeah, like anyone that's ever been to anything there is always blown away and impressed. It's awesome.
Yeah, and it's not quite the center of town, but it's a great spot just to go and hang out.
Yeah.
I mean, I look out the windows every day. Some of the local schools are holding class, teaching Spanish and stuff, just sitting out there in the sun.
Yeah.
Just, participating in it.
And so this was something that he just wanted to have, to give back, to help beautify the city and be a place that would be a blessing and a benefit to anyone that lives.
Boise's been our home since the beginning. And it's just it's one of our ways of being able to participate in a bigger way.
Yeah, that's amazing. Let's talk about, you say under the flag. I assume you're meaning Simplot Hill. Is we kind of always knew it as I was a kid. We would go up there for different activities, church activities, or different things, and we'd go ice blocking down the hill. Right, we'd go stop at the grocery store down the street, and we'd go buy ice blocks and go climb up to the top of the hill. And I remember being probably 10 years old or something, climbing clear up to the top and getting to the point where I could see up to the house and, be able to see inside. But I remember that. I remember sitting on ice blocks and riding down Simplot Hill. I guess maybe talk about that and, building the home there originally, eventually became the governor's mansion. And then my understanding has been transitioned back now. Obviously the home's not there anymore, but that there's some plans in place and some changes that are going to be happening.
Yeah, we just had an announcement a couple of weeks ago. But granted, loves land, and there's stuff we hold on to that we'll never use again. And I get calls on it. Hey, would you be interested in selling this, et cetera? Or we'll partner with you to develop it. And, our mindset is we don't have to sell it. It's going to be worth more tomorrow. We know that.
Yeah.
But if there's no reason to sell it, hang on to it. And, whether it's Southeast Boise where Micron sits and, the Simplot soccer field complex, et cetera, he went out and acquired that, I don't know, in the 50s when everyone thought he was crazy. Why are you buying a bunch of sagebrush?
Yeah.
You can't even put cows out there.
Yeah.
But he had that vision. And same with the foothills. And he and Esther were riding their horses because they own the stables below it. And they, where people came and boarded their horses at Highland Stables. And they were riding up there one day and, well, let's build a house up here. So that's how the house started. And So what, he would have lived there from 81, 82 to, I think they moved out in 05 or 06 or something like that. And Granddad was really big on, I'd love this house to be appreciated. And that's why the governor should live there.
Wow.
And so he got a deal with Governor Kempthorne, and they went to renovating it. And when I'd heard a story about the renovation one time where it was all about how they had to fix Granddad's shower, right? It was a walk-in shower, close the glass door kind of a thing. And they're like, we don't know where we're going to get this marble. I mean, it's Jack Simplot. And this marble, where is it? Is it from South America? How are we going to match it?
Yeah.
And turns out it's plastic. So didn't matter what you put in there. But, that was his mentality.
Yeah.
I'm going to have a big house on the hill. I'm going to be proud to fly this flag and have this view. But otherwise, we don't need to invest in those kind of things.
Yeah.
But yeah. So after it became the governor's mansion, needed those renovations, and there was quite a bit of turnover in the governor's office around that, because Governor Kempthorne became Secretary of Interior, and then Jim Risch became governor, and then after that went off to the Senate, where he is today, and Dad won governor at that point, and Dad had already spent a lot of time building out his place in Star.
Yeah,
and they still had some work to do, etc. But he just never saw himself living up there.
Yeah.
And the number one reason it was because government shouldn't be looking down on the people. It should be the other way around. And so that was the first reason for him not living up there. Plus, that hill, it's green, but it takes a lot of power to power those sprinklers.
Yeah.
And in 07, when the financial crisis, people are losing their jobs, how am I going to justify $100,000 a year water bill?
Yeah.
So it was just, we spent one night up there. I think it was after the night he won his second term, we all went up and stayed the night up there and hung out. It was cool. But then, expensive place.
Yeah.
Really, the return for having it for the state, it would be a burden on the state.
Yeah.
To have to keep it up. And so they turned it back to us, and none of us wanted to live up there.
Yeah.
And have that $100,000 a year water bill. So we decided to take it down.
Okay.
And we've spent since then, I don't know, the last 10 years figuring out what we want to do with it.
Okay.
And
and tell us about the announcement you guys made recently.
So we're turning it into a park, and we've got plans drawn up for trails and those kind of things to go around. We haven't decided on what we're going to replace his house with. We've got a great debate going on, 2 big debates. What do we put up there, and what do we call it?
Yeah.
We had a long list of like 60 different things we could call it, and it's just, Jack's Park.
Yeah.
Jack's Park works. And so there are plans to put in like, a place to entertain kids, like jungle gyms and those kind of things, and start showing off those tractors as well. Rebuild the what we used to be Esther's Riding Arena is going to be rebuilt to be able to highlight those tractors.
Cool.
People can hold events there and that kind of thing. But we're pretty psyched about it. But it's not going to happen anytime soon. These things move pretty slow.
Yeah, it's a process. Well, so talk to us as I wanted to ask a couple questions about your history. You guys lived in Australia for a little while. Talk to us about that. Maybe before I get into that, tell us about your wife, about Molly. We hit on her just a little bit right in the beginning, and the renovations of your home. She's beautiful, and she's so nice and really kind and pleasant. How did you guys meet? I've heard the story once before, but tell us kind of the story about how you guys met and her family and her background a little bit. And then you mentioned that she lived in Manhattan for a while. So tell us about that and her. And
so Molly grew up in New Hampshire on a 500-acre farm, and her dad is also a politician, and who spent most of his political career as a U.S. Senator from New Hampshire.
Okay.
3 terms.
Wow.
And every time I see Senator Risch, he's like, "Tell your dad hi. Wish he was back here because he was our conscience But wonderful, wonderful family. Molly's got 2 siblings, and one's in Texas, one's in Connecticut, and but just one amazing family. And so Molly, East Coast, went to private school starting in 8th grade, and that got her ready to go to Dartmouth.
Okay.
It's the joke, if you're from the Northeast, it's where you went, where'd you go to school? If you're from LA, what car do you drive?
Yeah.
From Seattle, what suburb do you live in?
Yeah.
That kind of a thing. But education was very big. And so Molly went there, her siblings followed her, et cetera, but she got into finance and ended up living and working on Wall Street. And if you can imagine, her first job was to buy distressed debt and then tear up companies. I say that. I say it like, these are companies that needed help.
Yeah.
And in a way, when you split them up, you're helping them stay alive.
Yeah.
And so, 25-year-old blonde yelling at CEOs and slamming her phone. I don't know if she wants me to tell them that.
I'm not sure that I can picture that yet, but maybe I just don't know her well enough.
But then she went on to manage $1 billion debt fund for a private equity firm that also obviously had a debt component to it.
Yeah.
And I was good friend. One of my closest friends lives in Seattle, and he and I kind of cut from the same cloth. He was in the military, I wasn't, but love for hunting, love for the outdoors, and he was getting married, and so I got to meet his fiance, who is from Seattle, and after we got to know each other, I got an invitation to their wedding, it was January of 2011. So I got an invitation plus one, and you in Sun Valley, and love for you to come. Great. So I don't know. We all went on a trip together, and we came home, and she says, "John, your plus one's been canceled. I got somebody you need to meet." And all she would tell me was that she was in the private debt business. She went to Dartmouth, and that her dad was governor. Because he was governor before he was senator.
Okay.
And I'm like, okay. I didn't look up. I didn't, I'll just meet her.
Yeah.
Apparently all of her friends got the same G2 on me, and they did the deep dive.
Okay.
What's this guy like? Who's he dating? All that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah. And they're friends like FBI agents, right? Like they're looking into, they know every girl you.
Facebook, Google, all that kind of stuff. I don't do any of that kind of stuff anymore, but so we ended up, we all got there on a Thursday. The wedding's on a Saturday. So we showed up at a big house in Sun Valley, and everybody couldn't wait for us to meet. And so, I don't know, it must have been 300 people. It was crowded. But they grabbed some stools, and they set them kind of in the middle of the room. And one of my best friends went over and grabbed her. She was in the middle of a conversation. He says, "You need to come with me." And she didn't know it. He goes, "Come, trust me, I'm a doctor." Sits her down in the stool. And then they grab me and they sit me down on the stool, and we're like, "Hey, nice to meet you."
Everyone's looking around and like,
exactly. But what's funny is that, reflecting on it, we both thought that we were going to meet another entitled politician's kid, and it turns out that New Hampshire and Idaho values stack up. And I was blessed to get to be a part of her family. I consider myself blessed to get to be a part of her family, and so we dated for a year. Every 2 weeks, I'd go to Manhattan, or she'd go to Seattle. We'd meet somewhere in the middle. Our fourth date was in Grand Forks, North Dakota, so I could show her a French fry factory, and then spend the afternoon looking at some of these fertilizer retail stores that I was telling you about.
Yeah.
And I'm blessed. I can't tell you how blessed I am.
That's amazing. I love hearing stories like that. And you guys have 3 kids now and beautiful family and
chickens, and
it's amazing how
talking about goats, and I keep saying no, but I don't know how long that'll last.
Yeah, well, I think we're gonna end up getting some goats too, so you can come pair yours with ours. So it's amazing how sometimes things happen in ways that you wouldn't have foreseen happening, and I'm sure that's not how you kind of pictured that all meeting, but or happening, transpiring, but it's amazing how those things do end up happening that way. And talk to us about your experience in the S16 company and what you guys do there or did. I'm not sure the extent of your involvement still at this point.
So I mentioned earlier about Granddad acquiring land, and and want to invest in different things and try different things. And the things that he wanted to do, the company management didn't want to have anything to do with this. We're in potatoes, we're not in hotels, kind of a thing. And so they came up with this idea to create a family limited partnership, or a limited partnership, where he was the general partner, and my cousins and me were the limited partners. And there are 16 of us, and so that's why they call it S16. And so we incorporated in October of 1991, and he spent the next decade really, we were hands off, and we weren't involved in anything that was going on. We had our own construction company at the time, and we have our hands in, like, we built the Grove Hotel and the ice. The guy who worked for Granddad was really into ice. So we also built Idaho Ice World and a whole outlet mall, Columbia Village Apartments. We had a whole bunch of projects going on. And then in 2001, he stepped down as general partner, and we formed another LLC that incorporated the board. So it's represented by each family. We got a couple of at-large cousins, and then we've got two non-family outside folks that are also help us make decisions.
Yeah.
And the first thing I thought was, you put ice on something, it becomes a loser. A great hotel becomes an average investment when you put ice on it. It's expensive, and when it came to like alcohol sales, we were part owners in the Steelheads too at the time.
Okay.
And when it comes to alcohol sales, if you're state owned, you don't get the same taxes that you do if you're private owned, et cetera. And anyway, he took those back. Block 22 now owns the Grove. The city now runs the Idaho Ice World. And by the way, we built it way ahead of time. Great vision, but you couldn't get anybody to skate there. And today, my son's into hockey, really into hockey. So I'm out there all the time.
Oh, yeah.
And all the families, a lot of them are from here, but also a lot of them are from Winnipeg and Boston and Minnesota. And so now you can't get ice time.
Yes. Yeah. I've got a good friend that his kids are really involved in like the junior Steelhead stuff, and same thing, right?
It was a little ahead of its time, but it's wonderful to have now.
Yeah.
And so anyway, we took over, and at that point we didn't have the construction company anymore. We did have Idaho Ice World employees on our payroll. But like I said, we got out of that business, but now we mostly partner with folks who are really experts in what they do. So, whether it's owning being partners in an apartment building, or I think we're partners in probably 11 hotels.
Okay.
Mostly here in the Western United States.
Okay.
We just started getting into self-storage. It doesn't look glamorous from the side of the street, but the numbers and the way the business model works looks great. And we've managed to, I'd say, almost triple it in size in the last 25 years.
Oh.
And again, it's just, I also think that it was a way for my granddad to put us all in a room and have to work together.
Yeah.
And families can be difficult. It can be difficult.
Yeah.
But we've all gelled, and I know what I can almost anticipate my cousins' questions, et cetera. And and while I was in Seattle, I've always served on the board. And then I took over as chair in 16 or 17, something like that. And we were working on my cousin's, who was managing day to day. We were working on his retirement, and he took ill, and he's fine now, but he retired on the spot. And I joked that we were dancing around the boardroom table, and when the music stopped, I didn't have a chair. So, but I love it. I love taking care of this, looking at what our next deal is. And I'm the only family that's a boy.
Yeah.
All the rest raised their families, and they put their hand up, wanted to be elected to the board, and they hold me accountable, and I love it. They ask the toughest questions, and something I haven't fully thought through, and it's a real team.
Well, I think that's amazing. And JR, your grandpa, was obviously an incredible visionary in a lot of ways with what he did for the corporation, but a lot of what he did with you guys, right? Like setting up opportunities and creating things like this, where it sounds like, it feels like it was very intentional about setting that up so that you guys could work together in a way, would have to work together. but there were opportunities there. We always use the term, I'm a big fan of giving hand-ups, not handouts.
Right.
And it's like, here, I'm going to take the connections and the opportunities that I have, and there's an opportunity here for you to go do something with it. If you squander it or whether you grow it and accelerate it, that's going to be up to you guys and the way that you manage it and manage yourselves. So
I think we've surprised a few people.
Yeah. No, it's amazing. And it's really a tribute to him and his legacy and your parents and what you guys have done and accomplished as a family and all the ways that you've given back to Idaho and to Boise and to really so many people. If you don't mind maybe talking about that for a little bit, I know you sit on a number of different boards, you're very involved in the community. Your family has done a ton to give back. We talked about Jump and some of the other things. What are some of the other ways that you've been involved? I know you're involved with the Inspire Excellence board.
I had my first board meeting 3 weeks ago.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm really green with it, but the thing I love, and an opportunity to work with Tommy.
Yeah.
is exciting to me. Leave it to him to come up with something like Inspire Excellence and in the Teens to Trades program. Listen, I may work in an office, but you catch me on the weekends at home. I'm fixing the lawnmower. I'm building fence. Next time you come, I'll show you.
I'd love to.
My handiwork.
Love to.
But my dad was very hands-on, and he picked it up from his dad. I've not had any formal training. I'm comfortable installing a plug, an electrical outlet.
Yeah,
probably shouldn't be doing it, but I've long since believed since kids a lot of the times think they need to go to college, and for some it's great, and for some it might not be.
Yep.
But there's been kind of I don't know. Maybe you can explain it better than I can, but a resistance for going into the trades.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And there's nothing there's nothing less noble about being an electrician or a plumber than there is what any of us do.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of money in it these days.
There is. It really is.
And so when Tommy explained Teens to Trades program to help the younger among us have a pathway into learning about those types of jobs and that type of work, I was all in.
Yeah. And I'm a huge proponent of education. I was fortunate enough to be able to go earn a bachelor's and a master's degree. I believe that education unlocks the door of opportunity, but I believe that education comes in lots of different forms.
Totally.
And one of the reasons why I wanted to do this is I thought, like, you know what, if I was 18, 19, 20, 25, 30 years old, and I could listen to some of these conversations and I could sit down and learn from people like you, to be able to hear your life experiences, the things that you went through, things that have made you and shaped you and helped you to get to where you are. I felt like, this is a very valuable form of education. Every time I'm driving to or from work, I'm listening to podcasts, I'm listening to books. Like, there's so many different ways of getting education, and the world is changing. The world's changing rapidly, and AI is going to change the way that we do things. It already is, and it's going to continue to do so. And so things like the trades provide opportunities, because plumbers aren't getting replaced anytime soon.
Yep.
Electricians aren't getting replaced anytime soon. People pouring concrete or framing or any of those things. Yep. Like, AI is not taking that over anytime soon. And so, taking that view of, and I think it's a great thing for kids to pursue education. Just what form that education takes for you may be different.
Totally.
And the traditional path of going to college isn't the right path for everyone, and that's okay. And I know a ton of people that are very, very successful that eventually own their own business. Or, I was talking to someone the other day that owns his own earthwork company, and like, this guy's a genius. Like, he's way smarter than I am. I've taken 17 post high school math classes, right? I have a master's degree in engineering. I was like, this guy's way smarter than I am. And he's like, oh yeah, I wasn't very good in school. And, I didn't like sitting at a desk. And so I got out of school as quick as I could, and I started learning moving dirt, and that's what I've done ever since. And I mean, he can just like rattle off everything, rates of how they can move things and how much can go in each one of these pieces of equipment, and, how much certain things cost and whatever. Yeah. Like, he's unbelievably intelligent, but he thinks that he wasn't, because like, well, I didn't go to college, I said, hey, like going to college and being intelligent,
my granddad
not synonymous.
He couldn't spell, or at least he thought he couldn't spell.
Yeah.
So he thought he was dumb.
The man's a genius, right?
Absolutely.
Like, and your dad as well, right? It's like,
Yep.
I've heard the story of him. You know, he was going to drop out of school and go join the military. It's like, I didn't do very well in school, and school wasn't my strong suit. I mean, eventually, you know, made his way through and went and graduated. It was like, you know, school was not my strong suit. And you just hear that guy rattle off statistics and rattle off names. And so that's like, he's a genius. Like he is highly intelligent, and, you know, pursuing a traditional path of education is not synonymous with being intelligent. And I'm a firm believer in that. Well, I think it's amazing the things that you've been involved with. Last thing I want to touch on, or last couple things I want to touch on with you before we finish up here. If you could go back, if you could rewind back and go talk to yourself 20, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, whatever,
question.
right? What would be the things that you, knowing what you know now, what would you tell yourself? What would be a piece of advice that you would have given to yourself at that point?
Buy Bitcoin. No, I'm kidding. You know, I guess if I got to have that opportunity to go back, I'd be, don't worry so much. It'll all work out. You know, maybe even not even work so hard. But you know, like life's stressful enough, but you know, you start holding on to what you do so tight that that you end up worrying about everything. Like it'll all work out.
Yeah.
It'll all work out. And you know, I'm blessed, but I still worry about a lot of things all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a profound piece of advice. Were there any people in your life that you felt like were some of the biggest impacts or that had influence on you? I'm sure your dad, your grandpa, or people that had major amounts of influence on you. Looking back, did you have other role models, or maybe one or two people that you can look back and say, hey, this coach, this teacher, this professor, this neighbor, this friend?
If I could give give everybody advice on something like that, is be on the lookout for a mentor. Be somebody who you don't necessarily have to agree with them, but watch what they do, learn from them. One of my first ones was Mark Butler, my boss at Expeditors, the one I competed with.
Get in there
early. The alarm in the morning. You know, he was, you know, full on dedicated, whatever it takes to get it done, even if you're working on Christmas Day. Now, you know, there's some things you have to do that for. But it was that dedication. Roger Smith at Campbell Soup. You know, he was in town a couple weeks ago and I got to see him. But you know, here's a guy that he grew up in Pepsi, and when he was my boss at Campbell Soup, he was in charge. He led our sales group that was everything that was not traditional retail or Walmart. So I called on Walgreens. I called on our team called on convenience stores, those kind of things. But here's the strategy. How do you come up with a strategy and make sure you're buttoned up? And that was what I really learned from him. You know, come in, know your stuff, and be able to answer the questions, and get rid of those spelling errors on your PowerPoint presentation.
Details matter, right? I preach that to my kids all the time. I coach football, and so all my kids, like, that's probably the number one thing they hear come out of my mouth is the details matter, right? Like, show up looking the right way, show up prepared. Like, there's some things in life you can't control. The things you can control.
Time you're late.
Yep. The things that you can control, you need to control. And no, that's a powerful piece of advice. Is there a favorite quote, or maybe, you know, any number of quotes of things that maybe you've taken on as a personal mantra, or things that you feel like have helped define you and your success of or personal philosophy with how you go about and do things, and you know, lead your value system of the decisions that you make every day?
I got a bunch of them, but there's one that was framed on my dad's office wall when he was at Simplot. I think it's still on a wall in his barn in Star. But and I don't know who the quote is from, but he was basically, "Sons of America, what you have inherited from your fathers, earn again for yourself, or it will not be yours." And that's what I get to do every day.
Yeah. Yep. Every nation is only one generation away from extinction.
Exactly. And every company is.
Every company is too, right? There's been a lot of companies that have risen and fallen. You know, every year, every couple of years, every decade. Certainly, the longevity of the Simplot corporations outlived a lot of them, but yeah, it does not. There's very few ways to succeed, and there's a lot of ways to fail.
Absolutely.
So yeah, a straight and narrow path is a correct principle, right? Like there's only a few ways to get it right, and doesn't matter whether you're in the potato business or in the construction business or
whatever,
in a sport or whatever it is, right? Like there's right ways to do things, and treating people right is an important part of that. And so,
absolutely,
yeah, no, appreciate you coming on today, John, and thanks for your time. And yeah,
it's been fun.
Yeah, we'll look forward to doing it again sometime.
You got it.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.